Well, hello again, boys. Welcome to Let It Spin, everyone. Wes, hi.
Hey, I'm spinning, mate.
You're spinning. And Martin, how you going?
I'm very well, thanks. So if you're
Beautiful.
spinning, I must be grinning.
That's it.
Or is that it? That's hee haw, I
Wonderful.
think. Picking and grinning.
And why not grin, given that we're going back 50 years to 1974? And today we're looking at the singles that were released here in Australia in 1974. It's a powerful year for all of us, and we're all a bit different in terms of our stages of life back then. Maybe I can start with you, Martin, as to a bit of a backstory of your experience back in that year.
Sure. So I was just beginning my teenage years, just starting high school. My family had emigrated to Australia from England 5 years previously. So by 1974, we were kind of feeling part of the furniture as far as Australian culture was concerned. And my grandparents, who I hadn't seen for a little while, came out to visit us for a few months. And my grandpa bought myself and my brother our very first record player that was ours. So, very portentous year, very important year in my
And where were
musical
you
life.
living, Martin? Of
Yeah,
Victoria?
that's right, Geelong.
Cool. Nice. And what are some of the things that you recall from 74?
Lots of sunshine. My grandfather was concreting part of the backyard because we had a few dogs at that stage. And yeah, riding my bike and playing downball out in the street, with the all the neighbours who are my age or similar age, and community life. It was like we're all new to the area, and of course you'd have to stop playing your game when a car would come. But being a relatively new area, not a lot of traffic around, so you just go out and play your games in the middle of the road. Not particularly worried about safety or privacy.
And you had your ear to the radio back in those days?
Yeah, so the year previously, I had discovered music for myself as opposed to receiving what my parents were listening to. So when I was growing up, my parents were listening to Glenn Campbell and Roy Orbison and Mamas and the Papas and the Carpenters and that sort of thing. So by 73, the year prior, discovered rock music and Slade and Elton John and Led Zeppelin and Yes and all kinds of music that was mine and not theirs. And so that started quite a journey. And of course, listening to the radio, there was the album show on Sunday night on 3XY, listening to John O'Donnell and his very eclectic taste kind of just opened my mind up to so much. Very thankful for those days.
Nice. And of course, there were a lot of singles released back in those days. You were on
Yeah.
top of what was going on singles wise as well.
So just a few minutes around the corner was a new shopping centre, and there was a Brashes record store there. And of course, twice a year they'd have their big Brashes record sale. So you could pick up LPs for $1 or $2, and you could pick up singles for 20 cents. So golden era, wonderful times.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Wes? What's your story in 74? You're
Yeah,
in
well, I'd,
Sydney.
I'd head on down to Parlings and Nicholson's in Sydney,
Yeah.
and they must have been in George Street, if I remember, near Wynyard. And I too would be going in there and checking out the albums and the 45s. I think I was in a different part of my life, however. I'd graduated high school in 1970, and I'd done the first 4 years of a music course at Conservatorium of Music in Sydney. And so I was already well and truly entrenched into the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all the major acts of the 60s. And then came along the 70s, and I tended to just, move across into the world of classical music and jazz. To me, 1974 was the end of an era.
It was the finish of the boppy stuff. And if you look through the top 100 of that time, many of the acts just never saw their way into 1975 or 1976. It was kind of like a real cutoff point. And there was something else that happened the following year, and that was in January that year. It was the launch of Double J. And Double J just changed the whole dynamic of music they were listening to. After all, they came in with You Just Like Me Because I'm Good in Bed as the very first song that they played. And then a month later, or actually it was really in December of 1974, when the first FM community radio station went to air, and that was 2MBS FM. And because of the classical background, I had an opportunity to be part of that and to be one of the first jocks or announcers on FM in Australia, probably one of the first 10. And that led me later on into doing work with the ABC and other stuff. But for me, it was a lot of fun, but it was, to me, a lot of change that occurred in Australian music at that time. So the end of one era, the start of Community FM, and the start of Double J. And that changed at that point everything that we're listening to.
Wow. Well, I'll be interested to see what your top 5 ends up being, Wes, because it's so diverse, your life at the time. It's obviously we've had 50 years to think about going back and looking back at some of those songs that have come out and assessing them accordingly, because my top 5 will be looked at as to what I like right now from that year. And I do recall I went through a list of chronological listing of what entered the charts back in 74, and I found about, I don't know, I reckon about 40 singles that I actually purchased that year. And that was the last year that I actually had my ear to the commercial radio and focused on singles. I did buy some albums that year, but singles were primarily what I was buying. And as Wes, you alluded to earlier, Double J came along and just blew our minds and expanded our minds. And basically, we didn't look back. It was pretty much album radio, and any singles that they played were, I guess, not being played on the commercial stations. And yeah, it really changed my life. And from 1975 onwards, it was mainly albums and a lesser look at what was going on singles wise. So I guess what we could do now is just start our top 5s and go from number 5 and count ourselves down one by one. Martin, we'll start with you.
Why not?
Number 5.
Number five. Number 5, right? To me, this is one of the great overlooked Skyhook songs, which is the first one they put out. And to me, what a statement of intent to launch yourself with Living in the 70s. I was always a bit confounded that Horror Movie was the one that caught fire, and maybe it was the theatrics when the Countdown in Colour appeared on ABC television, and maybe if they'd been able to do that theatrical performance and that visual for Living in the 70s, maybe that would have taken off. But it's just on the cusp, just a bit prior. Killer song, I think. Witty, satirical, insightful. all the things that Greg McCain is known for being as a great songwriter.
Cool. What about your number 5?
It was a very important year, uh, particularly what happened in 75, because that was also the year that colour television came to Australia.
Yeah.
And like we already had colour TV here, but it was sporadic and it wasn't 24/7. There were some programs that were already airing in colour, but it wasn't until some date, which I can't remember anymore, but I was there, and just as you were all there, that we found out what was going on. But we've got to go back a little bit, and that is to my number 5. And this is going to blow you away. It's ABBA, and it's Waterloo. And it is...
Watershed, more like.
Yeah, well, it wasn't their first single. That was Ring Ring a couple of years before. But it was the start of the hayride. And from then, thank goodness to, again, Countdown and ABC and all the other shows that were around at the time, all of a sudden you've got, here's this group from Sweden that are just perfect for television. And they even dressed and got their gear as a tax dodge so that they could go and appear.
Yeah, these sequins are tax deductible, thank you very much.
That's right. And therefore, bang, we can do something. But in Brisbane, Waterloo went to number 1. In Adelaide, number 5. Sydney, number 5. Melbourne, number 8. And Perth, number 20. It was just huge. Waterloo, my 5.
Nice. My number 5 is an Australian artist who I've grown to love more and more each year, especially as he was part of a super group back in the 60s. And it's Brian Cadd with Let Go. And
yes, brilliant song.
Great song. Good choice, Leo. Good choice.
Yeah, he kind of dominated around that time. He set up that label, the Bootleg label, with the Bootleg Family Band.
I suspect he was trying to imitate the model of like the Stax records and the Muscle Shoals, where the studios, and they'd have a house band and they'd make records in-house and for different singers and different artists. So I suspect he was trying to create a little community that would be like a hotbed of creativity. And
I think he realized too, like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, that if you're going to survive, performance is just one part of what you do. You've also got to do your songwriting. And you've got to then have other people do your songs. That wasn't necessarily a huge thing for Brian, although later on when he started doing stuff with Axiom and various other ensembles, people did pick up his stuff. And then he found that wasn't necessarily where he wanted to be. So he went to the United States and he really did work the songwriting and really began crafting his stuff, again, writing for other people. But here, you can't do that or couldn't do that. So it had to be what you were saying, and that is to form the camaraderie of getting other groups around in order to do their performances and then to make records. That was the only way you could survive.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Just an artist that is still performing right now.
Absolutely. He's just so good.
Yeah. Okay, back to Martin. How about your number 4, mate?
Another Aussie act, Ayers Rock, Lady Montego.
Wow.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Just that kind of calypso feel, and then the guitar breakdown, and it's like, you know, so the song's kind of cruising along. Then this guitar riff comes in, it suddenly puts it into widescreen, and I just thought it was so magnetic. It was just a surprise, you know, that they had this little surprise built in. Great song, terrific.
It
Amazing.
really was the
Yeah.
start of the Aussie stuff, wasn't it? Under Michael Gudinski, because Mushroom, that was one of the acts that he developed in 1974.
I believe they went overseas after this and tried their hand overseas to not a lot of effect. You know, a lot of Aussie acts tried their hand in the UK or in America.
They didn't have the budget because you had to pay to get in.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, that was one that I forgot all about. Lady Montego. Yeah, a minor hit. Did it actually get airplay in Sydney, Wes? Do you recall? Or probably not.
I don't think it got a lot of airplay
No.
anywhere.
No. Yeah, it's one of those songs that every few weeks you'd hear it, and then you wouldn't hear it anymore. Full stop. So you hear it sporadically. Your ear latches onto it, but obviously not enough people were buying it to keep it on the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, we still play it on 45 RPM.
Oh, nice. That's
Well, some of us have good taste, Wes.
good.
I salute you. Kudos.
Thanks for requesting it.
Kudos. Yeah. They don't give all our tricks away.
So, Wes, what about your number 4?
It's an artist that I discovered around 1973. And he was a great keyboard player and an artist who just had great words and great songs that you could sing along to. I'm talking about Sir Elton John and the landmark song called Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And I've got to confess, 2 of my top 5 are from Elton. And this is a song that was number 2 in Brisbane, 3 in Sydney, 4 in Perth, and 7 in Adelaide and Melbourne. It was released in 73, but its peak year was 1974. Just one of the biggest hits of that year.
Right. And that's a reminder that our next program will be focusing on the albums of 1974, and we'll be counting down our top 5 albums as well.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. My number 4 is a singer-songwriter that I didn't really take much notice of back in 74, but over the years, I've really grown to love his music. I think he's a great singer-songwriter, and I'm referring to Jim Croce, who unfortunately passed away in a plane crash. And
as they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Too many.
Yeah, for sure. Here in Australia, fortunately, we got Jim Croce, and he got a fair bit of airplay with a number of his songs, including Bad Bad Leroy Brown, which I think was his biggest hit here in Australia. But the one I'm focusing on today is I Got a Name. Beautiful song. And it's a result of me purchasing a greatest hits double CD of his back in the late 90s, and I haven't stopped playing it since. Jim Croce at number 4, I Got a Name. Martin, number 3.
Number 3, an act who just had very minor hits in Australia, but have had a resurgence in the last year or so in festivals around the world. I'm talking about Sparks and This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us. It was like a bolt of lightning at it. It's like, where did this come from? Where that had that kind of tinkly piano riff going on, then suddenly there's thundering guitars come in, and this operatic singer. And I mean, this is before Queen really arrived, so that operatic style of singing. And I mean, 10cc and the Sweet were doing that kind of big stacked harmonies thing in common around that time as well. But these were two American guys. They weren't English, so they weren't necessarily part of that community. But just loved the eccentricity and the high drama of the whole thing. And then they didn't really do anything like it since. They kept making records and have stayed around. And there's a documentary out on Netflix, apparently, called The Sparks Brothers, which I haven't been able to track down to watch. I would love to. Great
And a
song.
great compilation album as well of their major
Yes.
hits.
Okay. I shall look out for that one.
Absolutely. Where's your number 3, mate?
It's the B-side.
Oh,
It's the B-side. Or
we
it
didn't
was the
say
B-side.
A-sides only. This is good. Yeah.
And so this is the B-side. But I'm wanting to ask you, how do you spell Benny? As in Benny and the Jets.
So two N's.
Yes.
And if you're going to misspell it, you would put an IE instead of a Y.
Well, we'll have to tell the Poms and the Americans that they misspelt it. Because in the UK and America, Benny and the Jets was Bennie.
I have never, ever come across a Benjamin who would spell their daily name with an IE on the end.
Well, in Australia, we were Benny.
Yes, sensible.
So Australia got it right.
Well,
Or we're just lazy and just couldn't do IE.
saving money on the typeface. That's what it was.
So it had to be toasty and all the other things that we put Y on instead of IE. Yeah, so that's my number 3, Benny and the Jets with the fake applause.
Yeah, that's right. Wow.
Classic. Great song.
It is a classic. Well, my number 3 is an interesting one because my friend and I, Andrew and I used to go to each other's houses and we'd play albums and singles or what have you. And back in, I think it was mid 73, he purchased an album called Grand Funk Railroad on Time.
Yes.
And that was from back in 1969, I think. And I still can't work out where he actually got the inclination to purchase that one, but
That wasn't the one with the 3D glasses on it, was it?
no, it wasn't. It was going back even further.
Okay, right here.
And I just found it interesting and really enjoyed the album, but I believe there was a drum solo on one of the tracks that went for 8. But in 1974, this song called The Locomotion came and it just blew me out of the water. And I just thought, is this the Grand Funk that I was listening to at Andrew's place? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
And I'd heard the original Locomotion, and it just, to me, it just blew it out of the water because it had this heavier sort of accent to it, and then there was this crazy guitar solo in the middle, which was a bit disjointed, but it worked to perfection. And I love that song. And I went out straight away and bought the single and just played it to death. And yeah, that's my number 3.
I loved it.
Grand Funk with
I believe Todd Rundgren had a lot to do with producing that.
oh, really?
So he was just piling it on, just trying to get them a hit, I think, because live they were a bit legendary for their sheer energy and enthusiasm, just incredible energy on stage.
okay.
But trying to get on the radio. So he's trying to file a few rough edges off and layering on lots of production on top.
Well, it worked for me as a 15-year-old kid. It just had the word go, from that stomping at the start right through. And yeah, for me, that's my number three. It's continued on as being one of my favourites for that year.
Like you, I went back as a result of the Locomotion to go back and look at their catalogue.
Yeah.
Shining On, We're an American Band, Phoenix, E Pluribus Funk.
You go back to On Time. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a few albums.
Where is it? Where is it? Where's that sound?
The Evolution of Grand Funk Railroad. Wow. Number two, Martin.
Okay, the Walker Brothers,
What?
1974.
What?
No Regrets.
A wonderful song.
So I think it was a Hoyt Axton song, if I remember correctly, without looking it up. So the original version, kind of loping country-ish kind of thing, and somehow they built in they kind of decountrified it. They made it into this cruisy ballad. They did put in a pedal steel guitar, and it came to this huge crescendo with this amazing guitar solo in it. Again, high drama out of you think you're going for a nice little ride, and then there's high drama coming in. And of course, Scott Walker's renowned as a baritone singer for influencing acts like David Bowie and the Divine Comedy, held in very high regard. But I just think that this is just an absolutely stunning song. No Regrets, the Walker Brothers.
Beautiful.
Midge Ure did a cover of it.
Yeah, in the 80s.
Yeah, 80s or early 90s. And basically photocopying it. And it was like, yeah, no, like Midge got huge respect, one of the architects of Live Aid, and Do They Know It's Christmas? And so huge respect for Midge, but if I want to listen to that song, give me the Walker Brothers killer.
Yeah, Shirley Bassey and Jimmy Barnes also recorded it.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
As a duet?
No,
individual.
Individually.
Yeah.
Maybe even Sergio Mendes. But
oh
could be
man,
mistaken on that.
Yeah, it's well worth kind of listening to the various versions, but do come back to the Walker Brothers version.
Right. Wes, what's your number two?
My number two is a song that is known by two titles. The first time it came out, written by Peter Allen, it was called I Love You, I Honestly Love You. And then over the years, it's just been shortened to I Honestly Love You. I'm talking about Olivia Newton-John.
Yeah.
Or at least her version of it.
Yeah.
Here we go. There's four so far. And the key thing that has been driving each of those is melody. Elton, ABBA, and Olivia Newton-John. Songs where the main ingredient is melody and just something that you can sing along to. Benny's got a bit more emotion, but Olivia, what a stunning performance. The first time that she did that in 74, and then she re-recorded it and re-recorded it every year until she passed, I think.
Oh, wow.
Because it was such a huge song. That is one of the classics of Australian music and a performance which often gets overlooked in favour of more of the rock bands from that era. So Olivia.
Wow. Cool. That's great, Wes. Well, my number two is another American artist who started off in the 60s. And I'm talking about Steve Miller, the Steve Miller Band, and The Joker. This is another one of the songs that I just had to rush out and get the single as soon as I heard it. It's very sparse, the production, but to me, it just hits me every time I listen to it. The laid backness of it, the guitar work in it, it just, to me, it's a quintessential single, and it still gets played today. on classic radio. I'm sure Wes, you played it.
Yeah, play it often.
Yeah.
Yeah. Prefer the single to the album, though.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So the single would have been shortened as opposed to the album version.
Yeah, about a minute difference.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's as tight as whichever way you look at it. It's a brilliant song and has all the ingredients for me of a song that I can just listen to over and over and not get sick of. So that's my number 2, Steve Miller Band with The Joker.
Great choice.
Yep.
Okay. Before we go to our number 1, boys, have you guys got any honorable mentions of songs that didn't make the cut that you thought, are worthy of talking about?
Sure do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if the things we were going to talk about today, if they had to be released in 74 or if they were released in 73 and became a big hit in 74. Does that count?
Yeah.
So one of the songs I was looking at was Leo Sayer, The Show Must Go On, which was released in 73 in Australia and the UK, but 74 in the USA. And to me, out of all of his very early Leo Sayer, he was writing these little vignettes about loneliness and being down and out or down on your luck or trying to find a lucky break. And then a couple of years later, he went to America and obviously had some discussions and changed his direction and stopped writing about struggling and started writing more generic love songs and became an international artist at that point. But the very, very early Leo, I just found very poignant. And The Show Must Go On, in particular, the very first one that came out in Australia. Some other runners-up, not necessarily top 10 artists even, but people who I always think of when I think of early 70s, both Australian acts. One is the Moyer sisters and their song, Good Morning, Where Are You? And the other one is the Ormsby Brothers with You Don't Own Me.
Yeah, wonderful.
Just the harmonies, just to hear that. There's something about the human voice that is just captivating. And, these acts weren't very old, they're probably teenagers, all of them. But they just had something really poignant again in those songs and loved them. And one of my favourite prog rock bands, King Crimson, had a single out in 74 that has probably never darkened any airwave anywhere, but I love it, called The Night Watch. So that's not going to ring a bell, but if you want to go and look it up, The Night Watch by King Crimson, it's an outlier even for them. They could get very intense heavy rock or very robotic kind of gamelan beat influenced or even pseudo-classical music. But The Night Watch, I think it was a live improvisation and John Wetton on lead vocal and bass, singing absolutely beautifully, written about a well-known painting, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, go and check it out. King Crimson, The Night Watch.
Nice. Wes, have you got any honourable mentions?
Sorta. These are, when you look down any list of 1974, you begin to see that it was the year of the one-hit wonders.
Oh.
And these have all got either limited or amazing stuff about them, depending on your point of view. So let me just go through about 10 of them just by name. The Rubettes, Sugar Baby Love, Cringe, Carl Douglas, Kung Fu Fighting.
Oh, that stuck around too.
Yeah. Marvin Hamlish, The Entertainer.
Yeah.
Graham Bond, Farewell Auntie Jane. Osmosis. She didn't even mention my name or remember my name. Blue Swede, Hooked on a Feeling.
Unga Chaka song.
Yeah. Golden Earring, Radar Love. Brownsville Station, Smoking in the Boys' Room. Johnny O'Keefe and Margaret McLaren, the only recording she ever did. with Mockingbird. And then after that was released, the Americans, who was a James Taylor and somebody,
Carly Simon, James
yeah.
Taylor's wife at the time, Carly Simon.
recorded a carbon copy version of what JOK recorded. And then, not forgetting the day that a folk song went on the charts with the ABC show band with Brian May, nothing to do with Queen, and the theme from Rush. George Dreyfus, the Australian classical composer, pinches the theme, borrows a theme from the Palmer River Song, which was an Australian folk song or something from way back, and becomes the theme from Rush. And George, one of Australia's leading classical composers, that ties in with my background, but he's also the father of Mark Dreyfus, the current Attorney General.
Ah, wow.
There you go.
Interesting.
So there's 74 was the year of the one-hit wonders, but there were some terrible ones as well. But I won't go into those.
In my, I need
in your research, yes.
So Explosive Hits 74 was a record that got so much airplay, and they would swap in alternate versions of songs. So instead of Marvin Hamlish doing the entertainer, we had the New England Conservative Ragtime Ensemble. And instead of the then current rendition of Over the Rainbow by Billy Thorpe, we had the original version that he had recorded much earlier.
Yeah.
And where are we? Season in the Sun, Bobby Wright on Explosive Hits. It's like, Bobby Wright, who's that?
Yeah.
And it's Leo, it's the one version that will make you pine for Terry Jacks.
Oh, really? Wow, that must be bad.
Just saccharin. It's not bad. It's just artificial sweetener. That's all.
Oh, well, I've got a few honorables as well, boys. Where's another one-hit wonder that we've talked about many times? Sister Janet.
Okay, Sister Janet Mead. Cool. Oh,
the nun.
Prayer.
The nun.
Another B-side.
The nun who saved Aussie rock. Her royalties paid for refurbishment at the big recording studio. I'm sure of it, because after that was a big hit, suddenly the production quality of Aussie songs got better. It may have nothing to do with it, but who knows?
It sold about 4 million records
around the world.
Yeah. Wow. And it was, I think it reached number 4 in the US. And just an amazing record that was never, ever intended to be a hit. And of course, there are things like Bakery as well, doing their rock masses, and just about everybody was doing the rock mass back in the day.
It was number 1 for 4 weeks in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And, I remember talking with my school friends about it. It's like, wow, how long is this going to stay here?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is 4 times.
A few Aussie songs that I found that possibly could have made my top 5, but just bubbling under. Matt Taylor, I remember when I was young. Mm-hmm. And another one, this is a cover of a Chuck Berry song. I remember going to see these guys perform live. I was visiting my cousins in 74, and we went to this festival at Festival Hall, and it included the main act, which we'll go into very shortly, and also one of the acts that played were the La-Di-Das. And the song, Chuck Berry song, Too Poop to Pop. Also, there's a couple of pre-disco songs. I was probably one of the biggest critics of the disco music at the time. I've since turned a bit and kind of enjoying it these days. But back in 74, before disco really hit big, was George McRae with a song called Rock Your Baby.
Yep.
And the Hughes Corporation with
Rock Your Boat. Yeah.
So those were a couple of soul/disco songs that really hit the mark back in those days. And I was right into the glam rock scene
Mm.
back in 74. So I was buying singles from Susie Quattro, Devil
Yeah.
Gate Drive.
48 Crash, I thought was a killer. It still is a killer from her.
Absolutely. And in 74, she had Devil Gate Drive and Daytona Demon. Sweet. They had Teenage Rampage and Peppermint Twist back in 74 as well. So that glam rock scene was still thriving at that point and was soon to declare itself null and void long after. And of course, Sherbet with Silvery Moon, which I
Yeah.
thought would be a great song and still do, actually. I think it's one of their best. And some rock and roll from the Rolling Stones. It's Only Rock and Roll. And Bad Company, Can't Get Enough.
Mm.
That was from their debut album. So quite a few great songs that missed the mark. And of course, Martin, I thought you would have mentioned it earlier. Tubular Bells by Oldfield was released as a single. I thought they did well to
So there was the version that 3XY played. Then there was the version that Mike Oldfield officially released. So the official release was called Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, and it was a re-recording of a pastoral aspect of the larger suite. There wasn't that dum 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 dum, dum, the little where the motif is played over and over by the different instruments. That was not the official single.
right.
So the record company may have locally released a version that Oldfield hadn't authorized.
Yes, I think that's correct.
Which was what we were used to hearing, because we were used to hearing that theme where Viv Stansel narrates it, and he would tell you what instrument you're about to hear. Glockenspiel, grand piano, two slightly distorted electric guitars, and so on. Yeah. So, and my record of Tubular Bells I gave to my grandpa when he and my nana were going back to the UK again as a farewell gift, because classical music loving grandpa liked Mike Oldfield.
Wow. Okay.
So thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah.
All right, Martin, we're
Okay.
no more stalling. What's your number one?
My number one is somebody who you just mentioned, The Sweet. It was the last song written by Chinny Chap, and the last song produced by the guy who'd been producing all their songs up to that point, Phil Wainwright, I think. And it's a song called The 16s. Again, there's this kind of spectre-ish, Phil Spector would talk about what he was trying to achieve in the studio as teenage symphonies to God. And I'm like, to me, this is the English kind of symphony, teenage symphony to God, where, they're writing about street kids and they're writing about their everyday life, but the melodrama and the big guitars and the cascading harmonies. And after this, the Suite started recording and releasing their own songs. So you'd have Action and Lies in Your Eyes and Love Is Like Oxygen, all great songs. But this was the point for me when Suite had moved right away from the teeny bop image, and we're a real rock band. We can play, we can sing, we can do all of this, and here we are. The Suite. That's my number one.
Wow.
But I also recognise who you and Wes are about to probably mention, and I salute that song. Give that its due place as well. Recognising that I'm putting The Suite there for the purpose of this countdown. We can't make it a grand slam, right? That's kind of it looks like we're colluding and we're not. We haven't
I don't even
colluded.
know what you're talking about here.
Anyway.
And I'm surprised that Leo would even go with something that I'm about to suggest. Highly suspicious.
We are suspecting, but we shall see what we actually say, and then we'll unpack it if we have to in a minute.
My number one.
Holding my breath.
The song that I regard as the greatest Australian rock and roll tune ever recorded.
See, Leo, we did know Leo.
Yeah, that's the Apart From Stuff that I really love by AC/DC and the Angels and many of the other Aussie bands that I love.
Yeah.
And this is a solo singer who created an 11-minute classic divided into 3 parts. On the 45, part 1 on side A, parts 2 and 3 on side 2. Strangely enough, the record company of this 11-minute song didn't take it to the record company that they owned, which was 2UW.
The radio station, yeah.
Yeah, yes. So the record company that they owned, they didn't take it to the radio station that they owned and give them the exclusive or the start, thinking, oh, they'll only play part 2. So they took it down the road to 2SM and said, what do you reckon? And John Brennan, I think, was the PD at the time or program director, and said, yeah, we're playing the whole lot right now. Turn on your radio. and that was the Evie parts 1, 2, and 3.
Who by?
Stevie Wright of the Easy Beats.
Yeah.
Is that your number one?
It is my number one.
Oh,
what a fantastic song.
It's my de facto number one. It's my number 2 number 1. That's what it is.
yeah.
Oh, look, it has all the ingredients.
Undeniable.
The accomplishment of this particular song as a tour de force of music has to be recognised. And I don't believe it's getting its due recognition internationally. And that is by Stevie Wright, one of our great rock artists. And Evie parts 1, 2, and 3 has got to go down in history as being, if not the best Australian rock song of all time, like Wes has mentioned, in the top 3 or 5, because it stood the test of time. It was great when it came out, and I believe it's still great to this day. And there are some radio stations that are still playing it, but I don't believe it's getting what it deserves, in my opinion. So that's my number one as well. Evie parts 1, 2, and 3. I mean, if you want to isolate Evie part 1, which was a lot of stations played part 1 on its own, because as Wes said, it was on side A of the single, fine. It still stands up by itself as being a great rock song.
And the smoother stations, I don't necessarily mean those called smooth, but the more easy listening would be playing part 2.
Yeah. And what a great connection parts 1, 2, and 3 are. I mean, you just go through the whole 11 minutes and you've got through.
Well, you're taken somewhere. It's a journey. It's emotional.
Yeah.
Oh,
and the phrase you used just now, it's a tour de force. It really is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well
done, Vander and Young.
Yeah. A worthy winner today. Well, boys, next time we get together, we'll look at the albums. I'm looking forward to your take on what happened in '74 and what still resonates with you today as far as the albums are concerned. So we'll come back and look at our albums shortly.
Cheers, Leo.
Thanks for
see you all.
Bye.